My name is Grace Warner. I'm a product officer on the venture programs team at the NJEDA, and I am primarily responsible for organizing the biannual New Jersey Founders and Funders event. For anybody who's not familiar with the NJEDA at this point, we are New Jersey's principal economic development agency, which is built to create high quality jobs, catalyze investment, and foster inclusive community development in the state. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today for the Quick Pitch virtual training session in advance of the upcoming New Jersey Founders and Funders event, which is set to happen on March 22nd. During the event, attendees are going to be asked to pitch to investors in just 10 minutes with no pitch decks. So today's training is going to focus largely on condensing your content and getting prepared to have these types of conversations. So following a short presentation today, we're going to open up the audio and video capabilities to allow you all to ask some questions about best practices or give your pitch live for feedback from the experts. Before we begin with this training, I just wanted to quickly remind everybody of the immense ecosystem of programs that we have available to support companies at all stages in their development. So what you'll see on the slide here is just a few examples of how the NJEDA, along with our sister agency, the Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology, bring to financing, incentive, real estate, and community development resources to help work for companies in innovative sectors. If you guys have any questions or you want to learn more about any of the programs that you're seeing on the slide, please feel free to send someone at our organization an email, and my team would be happy to reach out and discuss them with you in greater detail. With all of that being said, I am really excited to introduce our host today. So today I am joined by two incredible leaders in the entrepreneurship space here in New Jersey. The first is Eric Liguori, who is the founding head of the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Rowan University. He's also the executive director of Rowan Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and he sits on the screening committee of Rowan's Innovation Venture Fund. Outside of his role at Rowan, he is an active angel investor, so he will bring a great perspective of what investors are looking for when having conversations with entrepreneurs. Joining him today is Jessica Vattima, who is the assistant director for Rowan Center of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, as well as an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Rowan. So without further ado, I want to kick it off to the two of them to begin the workshop.
Thank you so much, Grace. This is so exciting to be here with everybody today. Jess and I are, really excited to chat with you, to learn more about some of the ideas that are coming through and that we can expect to see at Founders and Funders, to talk a little bit about pitching. And we've really put together this deck to be conversational. What we have here is sort of a universal pitch deck template. And there's a few things I'll talk about, and I'm going to run through this in a live demo format. So I'm going to use it to tell you about me and Rowan and what we're doing, working through sort of these different elements, completely ad hoc. I haven't scripted it, prepped it. Maybe at the end, Jess will give me a letter grade and tell me how well I did. But I'm going to just try to use it because I do think that more than anything, especially when you're walking into this Founders and Funders event in this speed date style pitching, where you don't have slides, right? You need to just be able to talk about it. And it needs to just sort of flow. And so I'm going to attempt to do that with a program that I know well, what I do every day, and see if it works. But what's here is a slide deck for the purposes of you all having a visual for this webinar. You're not going to have slides at Founders and Funders, and you certainly don't need to have a slide deck. So I'm going to use this as a tool to talk through the pitch side of it today. But again, we're going to focus on trying to keep it conversational, let it be tacit, let it flow. Because at the end of the day, funders are going to be interested in working with people that they can just sit down and have a good conversation with. Does that sound fair? All right. So, hi, my name is Eric Liguori, and I run the School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Rowan University. I'm really excited to be here to share more about what we're doing in entrepreneurship at Rowan. I think we have a highly interdisciplinary program. I think we work with a really engaged populace of students, faculty, and staff. And I would say we've got one of the most vibrant ecosystems out there. We look to help people who are trying to start their companies by providing training, resources, connections in a way that they're able to then take their idea and move it forward and turn it into something that's viable for them. We do this through a variety of high impact programs. We have mentorship capabilities, and we have different pools of resources that we can bring to the table to help people along their journey. We think that entrepreneurship is very important because it, in addition to being tied to helping address societal outcomes, improving quality of life and health, being sort of interwoven through a lot of the sustainable development goals. It's also just the ultimate equalizer. And so in a economy where we have ever-growing levels of disparity and inequality, this is a way for people to level up. We work primarily with Rowan students, faculty, and staff, though we do work with the South Jersey region because Rowan wants to be an economic catalyst for the region. And we work with our partners at the NJEDA. So we're here to support you. We're here to support our students. We're here to be as helpful as we can to anyone sort of in our community. We acquire customers. I see, this is where I said it was completely unscripted. We acquire customers primarily through these networks, right? Our partners at NJEDA, and we work with them, our students on campus, a variety of different places, but really we work with anyone looking to move their idea forward. We fundamentally believe that our students benefit from engaging with startups in the community. And so if you're in our ecosystem, we'd love to chat with you. I'm going to skip because, like I said, not every one of these slides is going to fit for every context, and you can kind of change it up. But I would suspect that maybe making money isn't our core part of our mission. Our key competition are the people that we work with most. We work regularly with NJIT and NJII, with Seton Hall, with Rutgers, because I think that all of us as university partners in the New Jersey space believe that we all benefit when all of these companies are doing well. We, of course, are better because I think we do have one of the most vibrant ecosystems. I think that we have a really hands-on approach, but all of these institutions are great partners, and we're really excited to work with them. Our team consists of a group of faculty from a variety of disciplines across campus, as well as an amazing team of staff, including Jess, who helps lead all of our co-curricular programming and events. So far, we've spent the last 5 years really building an academic program, building an ecosystem in a community. We've ramped up our Rowan Innovation Venture Fund from a $5 million fund to a $25 million fund. And looking to the future, we want to be a better partner externally. We're growing across disciplines internally, and we're looking at our community outreach efforts. We have a new program we launched in Camden, or called Accelerate South Jersey, to help support entrepreneurs in the community there, of course, bridging that with our campus ecosystem. And we look to continue to do that. And currently we're seeking mentors and partners to help us do what we do better. I would say kind of at the end of any kind of pitch, you're going to have an ask or an action, right? So for us, I would say we have our upcoming new venture competition happening here in late April. We're always looking for mentors to come in and talk with our students and to help judge the new venture expo. We'll have 60 some odd idea stage companies there. We're also always looking for deal flow for the Rowan Innovation Venture Fund. So a $25 million fund that isn't explicitly for Rowan faculty, staff, and students, but also services our alumni and our partners throughout the region. So if you have some connection to our university, or you're doing business here in New Jersey, and you think that a private equity fund might be of use to you and where you're at with this particular company, I hope you'll submit to RIVF as well. Certainly, I don't have a perfect alignment with this, right? But the idea was I wanted to just talk through it. So now I'm going to rewind a little bit. We're going to go through this template and we're going to say hi. You're going to introduce yourself and you're going to talk about who you are and who you're from and what's unique about your company, right? What's your value proposition? You're going to talk about your classic problem and solution. And again, we don't always have to go in the order that this slide deck is running. Sometimes some people prefer to start with a really big problem and come to the team or come to the individual or the introduction later on. Sometimes people start with the solution and then backtrack into the problem in a variety of different ways. I think when you're talking about raising funding, you do need to convey why this opportunity is big, right? Because investors want to know how they're going to get their money back, how they're going to make money. And so that needs to be sufficiently large enough for them to be sort of greed inducing to get interested in putting money into it. You're going to want to be able to display that you understand who your target market is, that you can convey an idea about the size of that market, the percentage of that market you think you can reach, how you're going to reach that market, and that you really understand that market. To some extent, that's going to feed right into your customer acquisition strategy. And when you get down to this, I think, especially at the Q&A side, you're going to want to be able to talk about how much does it cost you to acquire a new customer, or how much do you think it's going to cost you to acquire a new customer, and what's that customer worth over sort of the lifetime of that relationship, right? So if you're selling, $100,000 luxury cars, and your cost per customer acquisition is $20,000, but you're going to make $30,000 on that sale, and you're going to do business with this person 2 or 3 times because of that relationship, then a $20,000 customer acquisition cost might be very well justified and very well spent. But if you're selling, $1,500 iPhones, and it's costing you $20,000 to sell a $1,500 iPhone, that metric doesn't work. And so I think investors are going to want to know how big the market is, and how efficient this sort of customer acquisition pipeline and the value of those customers are, to figure out, does this make sense for them and can they get their money back? They're going to want to know how you make money. And, this in some businesses is very straightforward, right? We're producing and selling a good or a service in a very clean, easy, profitable way. In other models, it's much more complex, and it can be harder to explain. I do think that, especially when you're dealing with a more complex model in an informal environment, in a 10-minute window, you have to approach that a little bit differently. Your goal in a founders and funders sort of conversation then isn't to close the sale, right? You don't have enough time to explain a really complex model in a 10-minute window. So your goal in this type of conversation, if that's what you're trying to do, has to be to get invited for another conversation. So you have to explain it well enough that they're going to understand it quickly and clearly, but don't get buried in the details, because some of these revenue models and business models are just sufficiently complex. You're never going to be able to do it justice in a 10-minute window. So having an idea of what your objective is for this round or this type of pitch is going to be very critical to your success. We talk about a 90-second elevator pitch, right? That's just to build awareness, maybe to exchange a business card, maybe to get a meeting. A 10-minute pitch, the same probably sort of target outcomes in this kind of a speed dating sense. Nobody's listening to a 10-minute pitch and saying, let me put $100,000 into a company. Here's the check. I'll hand it to you at minute 9:45. You're really kind of after I want to have a follow-up conversation. I want to see if we click as a person. I want to see if you seem like someone I could enjoy working with. I want to see if there's potentially fit with what you like to invest in and what I'm, doing. For me personally, I never necessarily set out to say I want to, be in a specific industry. I never said I want to be in like CPG, but all of my investments in the last 3 years have been in CPG. Right? It wasn't deliberate on my end, but I did know that, there are certain models that I don't want to be in. I don't personally like models that rely on, government regulation to create the need for my product. That has burned me in the past. I don't personally want to go into food, right? It's just not an industry that I'm super interested in. So you want to just sort of true up in this conversation. Are we even speaking the same language? Do we even have sort of aligned interests? We talked about conveying your value proposition. When we get down to this, we're talking about competition and really differentiation. So always a fatal flaw to say you have no competition. We all have competition in some way, shape, or form. You want to be able to say, here's what our competition does, and here's how we do something a little bit different, a little bit better. I like to suggest, when we have the luxury of a giant visual, right, and we can do a slide deck, that we build sort of a matrix, and we can list out by features that work to really help visualize how our competition is different, or how we're different from our competition, I think that's a really powerful way to do it. In this setting where you've got, 30, 60, 90 seconds or 10 minutes and no slides, I would still say to prep for that, go ahead and build out that table, build out that matrix, because I think what it enables you to do is very visually and more clearly see how you're different from your competition. It forces you to confront that in new ways, and it'll help you ultimately better articulate it when you don't have that table to pull up and hand out. You certainly want to be able to talk about your team. And in talking about your team, you want to signal legitimacy, right? You want to convey that this is the right team to take this idea forward. So we have to assume at any point in time that there's 5 or 10 people or groups out there in the universe working on the same kind of idea. So what team is going to be the one that wins out? Who's going to get this idea forward? Who's going to get it across the finish line? Who's going to make it profitable? Who's going to make that business work? That's something I think you can really, put some thought into and be deliberate on. If it were me, I'd try to signal someone who really understands the business side of things. I'd try to signal somebody who really understands the industry you're in, and certainly some startup experience. Because I think if you don't have startup experience, management experience, industry experience yourself in this particular space, and you don't have anyone on your team in it, as an investor, it starts to get very risky for me. Because anytime we go into a new industry, there's a lot of unknowns there, right? For me to go and start learning a whole new industry to make an investment, that's risky. For me to go and try to start my own company in a new industry that I don't understand, that's even riskier, right? So I need you to help build the right team between your co-founders, your employees, and your advisory boards, so that I feel reasonably comfortable as the investor that you have the people around you that you need to make this work in that industry and for the type of business model that you have. And so for me and the deals that I like to invest in, this is a really critical slide. Think about it this way. If you have a good idea in a reasonably sized market, the right team is going to get it across the finish line. If you have a bad idea in a reasonably sized market and a great team, that team's going to help you shift and pivot that idea. If you have a great idea in a small market, but the right team, they're again probably going to be able to help shift and pivot you in the right direction to find a way to make it work. But if you have a bad team, it doesn't matter how good the idea is or how big the market is. It's going to struggle. It's going to be painful. And so this is a really critical piece that I hope you'll figure out. Certainly, you're going to want to be able to talk about what you've accomplished thus far and what you're doing next and what you need in order to do that. And then is there some kind of ask? Maybe it's, I really enjoyed this conversation. I'd love to just give you my information and trade business cards and follow up. I'll meet up for coffee in a week or two, or I'll send you a slide deck next week if that makes sense. Whatever makes sense in the context of that conversation and your read on that person that you're talking to. I don't think from the investor's side or the funder's side, it's a one-size-fits-all piece. Some people might say, send me some information. I'll get back to you if I'm interested. Some people might say, I'm interested. Let's grab coffee next week. Certainly from the entrepreneur's side, you're going to have an idea of what's going to be helpful to you to move it forward. And so you've just got to sort of calibrate to that conversation. So in terms of the template, and I can certainly share these slides if you want to email me, it's Liguori, Liguori @rowan.edu. I can get those over to you. But this is sort of your universal template. Cover these types of things: problem, solution, who you are, value proposition, your team, your market, your competition, and kind of where you are at and where you're going. Do it in whatever order allows you to most comfortably talk about it. Do it in whatever order allows you to tell the most clear and concise story, and do it within the context of the conversation you're having with this person. Because at the end of the day, keep in mind, you really just want this to be a conversation. It could be the best pitch and the best product and the best everything in the world. But if that funder is sitting there saying they're not even cued in to why we're here and why we're having this conversation, I just want to talk and see if I like this person before I invest time to learn more, you're going to alienate that funder. So I think going in, being humble, being kind, being candid, kind of going with the flow, maximizing interpersonal skills is going to go a long way in this early stage sort of pitch event style. Now, I thought about wanting to run through sort of this template for what I think helps lay out the type of pitch we'd want to give. And certainly as an investor, the type of pitch I'd want to hear. But I wanted to also share a few things that as we work with companies that are pitching, whether they're companies that have come in and pitched to RIVF or student ventures or students competing in competitions or, a wide variety of different organizations. What are the things that I feel like I constantly am saying over and over and over again, right? And so that's what I have now. One, when we go to present, how many people should actually be standing at the front doing the talking? In a founders and funders scenario, you're probably looking at like one, maybe two people, right? Speed dating, smaller venue. I think that's a great number. I don't think you ever want to have 3 or 4 or 5 unless there's a real reason. And I would say maybe if you're not in college right now, but think back to like any professional setting you've been in or any high school group presentation you did. Did you ever watch a group presentation with 5 or 6 people dividing up a 10-minute presentation and walk away from it saying, wow, that was really great. It was cohesive. It flowed well, right? Most people would say no. So you want to have the CEO doing, let's say 80% of the talking, and then some other subject matter expert. Maybe it's your CFO talking about your financials. Maybe it's your CTO explaining nuances of your technology, taking up the rest of it. But have real good clarity for who is going to do the talking and how many people are going to be there. You also want this to be tacit. You want to know where you're going and you want to be able to roll with it despite whatever happens in your sort of life. And I know it's crazy and it's cheeky and all that, but I use this Beyonce example, right? Back in, I think it was 2013, Beyonce was singing, right? She was performing. She comes to walk off a stage and her hair gets caught in the fan. And she didn't flip out. And if it were me, and it'd be a lot harder for my hair to get caught in the fan. But if it were me, I would be flipping out. I'd be like pushing the fan. The mic would be on the ground. I probably would have said something into the microphone that I might later regret having broadcast. She just kept singing, right? She was there for one purpose with one goal. And she was so well rehearsed and so well scripted. She knew that her team would surround her and they would solve the hair problem. And she could keep focusing forward on what she was there to do, right? She didn't miss a beat. She kept her performance going. That's where you want to get with pitching. And in order to do that, you're going to want to practice. And as soon as you get to the point where you're like, I have said the same thing 600 times, and if I have to say it one more time, I hate it, that's when you're probably ready to go and have really tacit, easy conversations about it without it feeling alien, foreign, suspect, or not natural to you. Q&A time. I did not put this slide here just yet for you all to open up questions and answers. I put it here because fundamentally, I think when we look at pitch events and pitch competitions and screening meetings and any of these types of things where you've got judges or investors listening to a large array of different pitches, it's really easy oftentimes to narrow down from the 20 that you might hear, the 4 or 5 that rise to the top, right? Just universally, it's never hard to identify the top 30% of these. What differentiates those that get funded or those that win from the top 30, 40, 50%, I think is the question and answer. And so you can be as scripted as you want with your 10-minute pitch. You can give your perfect 10-minute pitch, but at the end of that conversation or at the end of that pitch time, there's ultimately going to be a question and answer where these people, these funders, right, can ask you anything. And your ability to answer these questions confidently and clearly is really critical. And I'm fundamentally convinced that the ones who get funded and the ones who win are the ones that nail the Q&A. I think that that's a very universally true statement. And I don't live in a world where there's a lot of absolutes, but I would almost say that this is a law, not a theory. If you can't think on your feet and be able to answer and talk about your company from different perspectives and deal with random questions or crazy questions, then you're really in a tough spot. And so practice, but you can't just practice by yourself. You need to practice in front of diverse audiences. So take advantage of events like Founders and Funders and go and practice and meet new people and talk about your company. Take advantage of 1 Million Cups that meets every Wednesday and go and practice and pitch in your communities. Join a Toastmasters chapter or just visit one and see if they'll let you give your pitch and get some feedback and see the types of questions you get. Run through it with families and friends and advisors and let them ask questions and see the types of questions you get. And if you do this enough, if you do this 8 or 10 times, you're going to start to see patterns in the types of questions you're getting. And that might mean that there's something you need to go and tweak in your presentation, right? You're not explaining something clearly enough, or you're not answering something that seems to really trigger with people. Or it might mean that you know immediately where you've taken people to and what their next question is going to be. And one of the things you can do, if you have an idea of what these common questions are, without disrupting your whole pitch and your whole narrative, is prepare for it, especially if you have a slide deck, right? Because you can put any number of slides you want after your thank you slide. So if you know that they're always going to ask about your customer acquisition model or your financials, or they're going to want to better understand the nuances of your technology or your solution, you can have slides that allow you to dive deeper in. So judge, funder, investor, whomever it is, ask you a question about that. And you say, oh yeah, I have a slide on that. And you can click to a slide you hadn't talked to afterwards, and you can talk through it. Again, I know you're not going to have slides for this particular setting, but you can have the same level of preparation for this particular setting. You can have the same ability to be ready to anticipate the types of questions they're going to ask for this particular setting. And you should, and you really should take notes after each of these conversations, or certainly as soon as you can after you get back in your car, about the questions you were asked and where you had really good answers or really bad answers. Because I promise, do this enough, you're going to see some patterns emerge in the types of questions you get asked. Now, I have Jess with us, and Jess is amazing. She's great. She's wonderful. And she and I are glad to answer any questions. We both hear lots of pitches all the time. And we're glad to let you pitch and give feedback. We're glad to answer questions you have. And actually, you know what? I'm going to share one more thing before we go into that. I sat this morning through a series of pitches for an investment group. And the first presenter went and they gave a great presentation. And then the second presenter starts presenting, right? And the first presenter didn't turn off mute, or didn't mute themselves, and takes a phone call. And so we kept trying to get that person to mute their line, but they weren't hearing it. And it's an honest mistake. We've all been there, right? We all kick ourselves when we do that. No harm there. But that second presenter had to go full Beyonce, right? They had to overcome the adversity. They had no control over the environment. It was completely unfair to them, but they had to roll with it. And they had the option to roll with it, or they had the option to react really poorly to it. You will not always know the scenario you're walking into. You won't know if someone's phone is going to go off and interrupt your conversation with them. You won't know how loud the person at the next table to you is going to be. You won't be able to control if a fire alarm goes off. This is just life. It's going to happen. So I walked away from this screening session as, someone who's evaluating the viability of investing in this company, saying, I really liked that presenter. I liked how collegial and professional they were. I liked how they weren't flustered by it. I liked how courteous they were. And so liking the person, especially in these shorter form conversations, goes a long way to building that relationship that ultimately leads to an investment decision. Now, Jess, thank you for making time to join us as well. How about we take some questions and answers?
Let's do it. I have to say, I'm so surprised that you're so knowledgeable about Beyonce. I think of all the things you said, that I was most surprised about that and impressed.
Well, my working knowledge of any kind of pop culture is pretty often very poor. I I'm glad that now you have acknowledged that I'm up to some of 2013.
You know, do what we can.
So we're glad to answer questions. We're glad to listen to some pitches. Grace, how do you want to?
Yeah, so the audience should have the availability to open up their audio and video capabilities now. So we'll invite you all to interact. Feel free to ask any questions you have about best practices, or if anybody feels comfortable giving their pitch live, we'd be happy to provide some feedback and workshop them with you guys.
Well, I'd like to start if I can. So is it that slides are not allowed, or is it okay if we bring like one or two visuals? I just find that the problem we solve is like a problem within a problem, and it's usually easier to have at least one visual with me.
So I can take this question really quickly. So for the format of the event, the investors will be at their stations, and the entrepreneurs will move from station to station to talk to their different investors. So if possible, we'd advise to leave any presentations or anything like that, as it might become cumbersome to move around the room freely with them. So just to preface, the investors will receive a copy of your executive summary that you submit. So if you do have a visual, it might be helpful to include it on that, so they're able to keep it even following the event, and they're able to easily remember your company, the visual, and what you do.
I had a really great informal conversation on Monday with an entrepreneur who's about to open a new venture here in North Jersey, and we were just talking with I'm not looking to invest in this industry or this company, but it's just, I knew he was working on it, and I said, hey, how's it going? And it was really neat, because in about 4 seconds on his phone, he was able to show me like just 3 images that created massive clarity for me. So I wouldn't bring a slide deck. It doesn't sound like it's that kind of event, but if there's, that one thing that visualizes something that you can pull up in 1 second, do it. If it's going to take you 10 seconds, it probably is going to be disruptive.
I had a question. Hi, Grace. Thanks. Hi, Eric and Jessica. Thanks for doing this today. My nephew is a senior at Rowan right now, marketing. I don't know if he's taking your class. I'll have to check. I don't know if he's taking entrepreneurship. I teach entrepreneurship at Stevens. I'm actually here right now, so we should get in with you guys and what you're doing as well. It'd be kind of a good side conversation. My question is that the funders that we're going to meet in this speed dating, will you send over a list of those people beforehand so we could do some research on them?
Absolutely. So in the week before the event, you'll receive a list of all the investors you'll be meeting.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And thanks again for doing this today. This is great.
Yeah. Thank you very much for asking a question. Iman, did you have a question as well?
Yes. I hope everybody's doing well. Nice to see you again, Grace. Nice to meet you as well, sir, for hosting the event. Very informative. And like one thing, there's like a question I have. I've seen that a lot of investors, they typically like to see always a co-founder with, involved. But my question is, at this event, is it necessary or recommended by you guys to have our co-founder or a member of our team? Because I'll be very honest with you, I'm the spokesperson of the company, and I feel as though the way I relate the project of the company, the mission of the company, is probably better than anybody on my team. My team, we work together, but I am the one who explains things. So would it be wrong if it was just me coming by myself, or would you recommend I bring my co-founder?
Eric, maybe you want to take this one from an investor's perspective. Just from a logistics perspective, we allow companies to come with just one person, or you can bring up to 2 representatives. But I'm interested to hear Eric's thoughts as coming from an investor, what their viewpoint is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's context, right? If you're the spokesperson and you're the one best able to tell and share the story of the company, especially when it's, a more informal setting with 10-minute sort of speed dating style, I wouldn't add another person unless you thought they were excellent or created value beyond what you need. If you're the main person driving this, the main sort of public outreach person, but you're going to go in and you're actually sitting down to pitch for a significant amount of money, And when someone on your team is your financial expert, right, or your technical expert, I might have them in the room just in case a question comes up around that. But I don't think in a 10-minute format, I would force a second person in.
Okay.
It doesn't, I don't think it's that kind of event. I think you can certainly navigate yourself around questions that come up. But you know what, we actually have some slides on that that my CTO has, and I can send those over to you this afternoon. And then even if you don't have the slides, you can pull them together, or you can set up a follow-up call with that subject matter expert from your team. So I'd probably approach it that way, at least with this type of event.
And my last quick question is, I mean, you brought up something interesting, customer acquisition cost. So, I mean, I'm actually a founder of an app, and that's a metric that we look at, you know, user acquisition costs. So, you know, my app is basically barbers that come to your home. And well, the thing is that, you know, we get service providers first, and then we get the customers. So when I'm talking to them, you know, I'm very realistic. You know, the amount to acquire the service providers, we came, it was $5 for user acquisition cost. And, you know, it was $5 for the service provider acquisition cost. Now, revenue, obviously, you know, it takes time for the public to understand of a new concept. So my concern is this, that we spent a lot of money on getting users online. So we have 1,000 users, active users, but transactions are not as high as they should be. So, I mean, the revenue is not high, but I know that the market for barbering and hairstylists is huge. It's a multi-billion-dollar market. So it's just the fact that, you know, we need more people to know. Do you think that, like, in a situation like that, where I've spent money, capital in acquiring users, but the revenue is not high, how would you suggest to navigate something like that with these people?
I think, well, I think anytime you're trying to build a multi-sided platform, it just gets more expensive, right? I mean, you think about building Uber or Airbnb. Like, the point of houses on Airbnb if there's nobody renting them? What's the point of drivers on Uber? Nobody calling for it, or nobody knows that they exist. So I mean, it's, you know, it's expensive. It takes more time. I would say that your scenario becomes a really classic. You need to talk to the right type of investor, the right type of person, because people are going to get it or they're not. Right?
Someone who believes in the vision.
If someone's not familiar with mobile, if someone's not familiar with tech, if someone's not familiar with building sort of multi-sided platforms, they're probably not the right investor for you. I think you need strategic investors more than anything, people who get your space and can contribute value beyond just money, especially at the earlier stages with something like that. And so don't be afraid to disqualify an investor just as much as they're going to disqualify you.
Okay.
I would also look at tech-driven events and networks. And then certainly all of these companies that have raised significant money, right, in you know, spaces like this, have first established and found a way to be very scrappy. So I would say, rather than trying to go huge, go you know, even like statewide, like just focus everything you have, getting it up and running in one region, and get some success stories you can talk about, where you can talk about how it's working for users and it's working for service providers, and get some key metrics off of your, you know, top 5 sort of users there, and then just keep building from there, right, and scaling from there. But I think you've got to get really scrappy, because it's very risky to invest in something like this before you have a little bit more traction. And so the scrappiness piece is going to be huge.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that.
And then, of course, Jess is going to have to connect you with one of our student alums who's in this industry and might be a great addition to your platform.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, Dan. I see your hand raised if you want to go ahead and ask a question as well.
Hi, thank you everyone so much. This has all been really helpful and informative. I had a question about the final slide where you're saying the ask or the action, what you're seeking in at the end of the conversation. How structured or how formal of a request do you think the investors would want to hear. We do have some pretty solid numbers as part of our other pitch deck when we present, where we have solid numbers, but what degree of flexibility do you think is it better? Because obviously you need to be dynamic in the situation when you're seeing however many investors in just a 10-minute window. What would your advice be on that?
I would say the minute you're watching episodes of Shark Tank to close the loop on that, then that's probably not where you want to go with it. But I do think that it's all contextual to where your company is at, right? You don't want to be the one who's there saying, well, we have this idea, we think we need, $5 million to get it going, right? But if you're actively raising a $250,000 seed round, or you're trying to close out a Series A, and you know what those numbers are, I absolutely would say that. I mean, why not? If you have confidence that, like, to get this past clinical trials, let's say, or to get you from prototype to market, it's going to cost X dollars. I would toss that out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
The other piece on that, I think if you know what you're offering, like if you're working off a convertible note, I would say it.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. I see Joel Kaplan's hand raised if you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm wondering if you have kind of a cheat sheet or, key investor terms for dummies that we could review definitions of things that we might be asked that we might not be aware of necessarily. I don't have an MBA or necessarily the same level of business experience that the investors will have. And I just want to try to prepare as best as possible for the questions that they're going to ask by understanding the terms that they might be using.
There's a book. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to pull it up here to make sure I have the right one. If you email me, I can definitely find it. But I think it was called. Here it is. Financial Intelligence for Entrepreneurs. It's by Karen Berman. It's $20. And that book's excellent in terms of just like crash coursing through exactly what you're talking about. I'm gonna drop a link, just I guess, to the Amazon side of it here. But that it's an easy read. It's a little technically dense, but you can get through the pieces of it that are relevant to you. And it's really just a crash course in this kind of terminology. Brad Feld also has one out called Venture Deals that also does a really nice job. So I would say, either of those would probably be where I would tell someone to start.
Great, thank you.
I have one more question, sorry. Back to the investors that'll be there. So I know you said you're going to send those around, and then I just saw somebody asked in there, are we going to be matched up with people that are looking to invest in what we're doing? So how much of a breakdown will you guys send us over? Like, will you tell us if they're doing B2B, like we're a B2B SaaS model, will we know they're B2B SaaS, and like the levels of investment they do, 250, 500 million, or any of that stuff will be in there. The more, the more information we have going in, the better. So I don't know if you guys are breaking that out, or we're just going to get a list of people that we're going to meet with.
Absolutely. So you guys will receive a list of the investors that you've been matched with and just a short blurb about their investment thesis. A lot of the investors, so nobody will be an individual investor. So all the angels will be representing an angel group, and they'll all have information, more detailed information about their investment thesis available online on their website if you want to do a little bit of homework. And as well, you'll receive the schedule of investors you'll be meeting, but the list of the full investors will be available as well. So if you are interested in networking outside of the matched rounds, there'll be plenty of opportunities to do so throughout the day.
Great. Thank you, Grace.
Absolutely. Thank you for the great questions. Awesome. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions. Oh, there you go. Joel, did you have one more?
Yeah, one more for you. I'm just wondering, you mentioned humility is important. I would wholeheartedly agree. But I'm wondering where the threshold is for humility and, conveying incompetence. If you don't know an answer to a question, how many times can you say that within a 10-minute period without looking like you simply don't know what you're doing. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that, well, yeah, I would say you definitely get one. You might get two, you probably don't get three, but I mean, I'm making up numbers, right? At that point. I would say there's different ways to answer questions. And so you know, if you don't know something, you could say you don't know it, but you know, if you know who knows it, you know that your company has this information, you know that you're just not the best person to describe it or to explain that piece, you might very well be able to say, you know what, that's not my main focus area, so I won't do that that justice, but I'm glad to tee up an email between you and our chief technical officer to explain that, or our marketing person to talk about the outreach strategy, or like there's probably competent ways you can say I don't know, right? If you have the right team and you know you can direct them to the right person on that team who can get them the type of answer they're looking for, that probably buys you, you know, from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3 in 10 minutes. I mean, I sure hope nobody's wanting to get to 4 of those, but you probably have some wiggle room. I do think that certainly everybody who's going to go and invest wants to invest in someone who's competent, right? Who's confident. Well, competent for sure, but confident. And they want to work with people that they like. So I guess my example about humility was I don't want to invest in a timid founder who doesn't seem to, you know, confidently be able to articulate where they're going with this company. But I also don't want to invest in the guy who just starts swearing and can't even function because someone else is talking on Zoom, right? And gets irate, gets unprofessional, gets so flustered that is going to derail their entire ability to talk about their company. And so I guess in that perspective, I was saying like this adversity didn't impact negatively my view of the first company and the person who was talking, because we've all been there on Zoom, right? And it didn't negatively impact the second company, even though I couldn't hear it as well and it got choppier. Like I walked away really saying like that guy handled that really well. So confidence, a little bit of maybe blind confidence even is what you want to see. You don't want someone whose head's in the clouds, but I don't think it's a bad thing. And I do think you do get 1 or 2 of those.
Thanks.
Awesome. I see Dan's hand raised as well if you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks. One more. This one's a little bit more abstract. With some other more formal presentations we've done with pitch decks, one of our investment mentors had encouraged us to hit really strong and emotional at the front. We work in autism education, and so it can really help launch an emotional plea to the people who are listening and our potential investors. So I had reworked the way that we presented to try to incorporate some more emotional aspects into the beginning of our pitch. Then listening through your original outline where you intro yourself, you intro the company, get into the value proposition. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on, it almost seems like this setup might be a little bit more, it leans towards, hey, let's just get everything out on the table and talk about it instead of trying to have these emotional plays and tricks that you're coming out and hitting hard with. So I'm sure you could ask 10 people and get 11 perspectives on this, but from your experience in settings like this, is it better to kind of just stick to the guns of the outline and let the conversation run itself versus coming in and trying to razzle dazzle right out of the gate?
So I think it depends. You're talking about a pre-structured 10-minute environment where everybody's ready and there for this purpose. So maybe it's a little less important in that kind of context. I do think finding a way to grab someone's attention and sort of hook them early on is important. I get worried when, and I certainly by no means am suggesting this is your scenario, but I'm sure being in this industry, you've seen people do it, right? Where it comes across as exploitative. And so I would say just, you've got to leverage that tactfully. I'll talk about one of our student founders who I didn't get the business until he changed up his pitch the way you're describing. He basically goes and works with hospitals to make hospital rooms less scary for children. And they do this by adhesive labels and messaging and things like that they can put over syringes and IV bags and all of it. And I had heard this pitch several times, and I just kept saying, like, all right, but it's a sticker on an IV bag. Like, that's not going to make a hospital room that much less scary, right? It didn't click for me. It clicked for other people. It just wasn't like, I wasn't quite sold. Like, I love the kid. I love the story. I love everything he's done with it. But I was like, I'm just not getting how this works, until he changed up his pitch. And he, instead of saying IV bags, he said blood transfusions. And then it hit, right? Then for me, I'm sitting there saying, oh, wait, it's not a kid getting saline. It's a kid staring at a bag of blood. And instead of seeing blood, they're seeing smiley faces, right? So yeah, I do think that those types of things can be very powerful when they're used the right way. That transformed his whole pitch for me. And I already liked everything else about what he was doing, but that piece was like, wow, it went from something where it's like, all right, I mean, I'm not opposed to this. I just don't think it's that transformative, to like, oh, wow, I can see how that could be a huge difference in a child's experience.
That's great. Yeah, there's a very fine line to walk between, hey, care about us because we're doing something in autism, versus I worked in this for 10 years and I've seen the incredible outcomes. Here's why we want you to get involved. Yeah, that's great.
For sure. And you've probably seen people pitch that very poorly.
No comment.
Awesome. We have time for just maybe one or two more questions. I see Adrian's hand raised if you wanted to go ahead and ask.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys doing this. It's great. And I'm going to piggyback on a question that looks like it's in the Q&A right now. I just want to make sure that from a format perspective that we have the correct idea. That is it one presentation that all the investors watch, and then you have 10 minutes of Q&A with each of them? Or are you giving presentation and Q&A in 10 minutes to each of them?
Presentation and Q&A in 10 minutes. So there will be a timer. It will ring when it's time for you to move to your next station. You will have a couple minutes in between each round to move to the next station and identify the investor. But 10 minutes to introduce your company, allow time for them to ask questions. And throughout the day, we'll have a networking lunch for about an hour. So if you have some follow-up conversations you want to have, and we'll leave a couple other short periods for networking that you can continue to have the conversations with anybody who you felt that you had a really impactful conversation with.
Gotcha. So really the pitch itself should only be a couple minutes and hopefully leave. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking the question. Yeah, the point of the presentation is to really get you thinking about what the most important information is, knowing that you really just have a few minutes to really attract and entice these investment professionals. Iman, I see your hand raised as well.
Yeah, one quick question I had was that, there's this website called crunchbase.com. You can see a lot of investors in the United States and globally. And I'm just curious to know, like, these investors that'll be here, what's the typical dollar amount that they invest? Is there a range? Because, certain groups nationally, they're fixed to, 500K to $1 million, $1 million to $3 million. Some do only seed, some do Series A. So my question is, what dollar amount do these investors that are coming typically work with?
Absolutely. So I did get an opportunity to meet with all of the entrepreneurs who will be attending. And so I have a great picture of the stage of companies and about how much they're hoping to fundraise. On the investor side, we're anticipating to have a really impressive diversity. So we'll have a couple accelerator models and angels who will do a little bit of a smaller ticket size. We'll also have the bulk of it being traditional venture funds, which are a little more mid-market. And then we will have a couple venture arms of some larger corporations, which are able to do a little bit of a larger ticket size leading up to a couple million. So depending on where your company is, how much you're trying to raise, and about how advanced you are in your stage in development, our team will work on the back end to match you with investors who are relevant for you, who are going to be a good fit to have a productive conversation and be able to kind of meet you where the level that you're at.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to drop a link here in the chat. This is to the second season, our 2022 season of our Entrepreneurship at Rowan podcast. And what the whole season was interviewing different funds kind of in our space. So the Rowan Innovation Venture Fund, we had Ernie Holtzheimer, who's the managing director. We had Bob's Ciarfoli from Broad Street Angels, Mark Tribold from Ben Franklin Tech Partners, Joanne Corcoran from Golden Seeds. We had Delaware Crossing, Town Square Media, Soundboard Venture Fund. They're all talking about their funds. And that was from the last like 10 months. So it's very recent. If that's of interest to anyone, you can listen to them talk about strategies for pitching their funds, what types of things they're looking for in founders, the types of deals and spaces they invest in. Certainly not an exhaustive list, but Joe had put this together. He did a really nice job with it, and I think they're pretty useful.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much for the really great questions today. It looks like we're coming up on just about time here, but if anybody has any additional questions, or if you find yourself needing any more resources leading up to the event, feel free to follow up offline. You guys have my email as well as Eric's email. And just wanted to remind everybody, if the conversation today maybe spurred you to think about your company or your pitch in different ways, if you haven't already sent me an executive summary, please get that in, as well as your business registration. But if you have already sent over your executive summary and the conversation today inspired you to maybe change some things, we will be accepting revisions up until about March 13th. So remember to get them in ahead of time, or if you have any changes, get them in as well, so that we can ensure that investors you'll be meeting have the most updated information about your organization. And please, yeah, feel free to follow up online or ask any additional questions if you guys have it, and want to make sure that everyone is feeling incredibly prepared for this event. So thank you one more time to the wonderful representatives from Rowan. Thank you guys all for your engagement today. I think it was a really great discussion.